Well, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate the things that you said, John, and I think that should be recorded, and I think that that's worth putting out there. I think that's a good word. Whatever you do to put that together, that'll be great. Hope you look for that. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of New Hampshire exiting the Union. Okay, the last time we had states exit the Union, it wasn't so good for those states in the South, you know. And I think that it's worth looking into the Southern history of the South wanting to exit the Union. Okay, and I'm going to show you something, and I'm going to read the significant parts of. All of it's significant, but some things from the Declaration of Independence. Because many of the South believed that the Civil War was the second Revolutionary War. Because it was amazing that in America, that those states were going to create a central government, and they were going to have the same problems again. Now, granted, I don't want to get into certainly when people want to make it a racial issue with respect to the South pulling out, but although the South reaps certainly the consequences of enslaving a people, I don't support that at all. But the idea of understanding what the Constitution allows the federal government to do, what the state constitutions allow or are permitted to do, these separate states, I'm going to show you from the Declaration of Independence what their authority was, which was what the problem they were having. And if you haven't read the Declaration of Independence in a while, I highly recommend it. But before I do, I want to read a quote from Frederick Douglass. Because if we're going to move in this direction, which I highly recommend, we're certainly going to be up against a lot. And certainly we're going to be up against having conversations with our neighbors. But here's what Frederick Douglass said. This is from 1857. He says, "Let me give you a word on the philosophy of reform. The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. The conflict has been exciting, agitating, all-absorbing, and for the time being putting all other tumults to silence. It must do this, or it does nothing. If there's no struggle, there's no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want the crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you will have found the exact amount of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they're resisted with either words or with words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." So what's your oppression level? What are you willing to put up with respect to tyranny or your government? That's the level in which you will be oppressed. So when I heard that, I was like, wow, my tyranny level's way too high. You know? So, and it's amazing, if you haven't read the Declaration of Independence, if you haven't memorized the sentiment here, then you're missing a birthright that belongs to you. And any people who want freedom, if they don't read and understand the sentiment of this, you're missing out on not just this. When I read this isn't just some writings from history. This is a guide for any people. And when I read this, I'm thinking, this is our struggle. This is what we're up against. So let the words resonate in you. Think about them deeply. I consider these words sacred. They're sacred. There are people that it wasn't, although originally these were penned by Thomas Jefferson, they were scrutinized by a body of people who pulled words, added words, things like that. It's no accident what is written here. This is all meat. In the musical 1776, which I highly recommend, you know, they're going to vote in the Congress, the First Continental Congress, on whether they're going to even have a conversation about liberty. Okay? they're going to have a conversation, and they wouldn't even they didn't even want to discuss it. Now, why wouldn't they want to discuss it? The reason was because if you're going to talk about separating yourself, one of these colonies, from the King of England and Great Britain, you were talking treason. You're talking treason. So it's not what you think. So anyway, everybody wave. Okay, so it's not that. Now look, if it was that, wouldn't that be wonderful?
I think he planned it that way.
That's wonderful. Isn't it delightful? Anyway, oh, that we would make such a difference, huh?
Yeah.
So anyway, so they were just bantering in that first Continental Congress just to discuss the topic of independence, which was tyranny. I mean, it was not tyranny. It was treason to even have a conversation about that. So the idea of so they were saying, "Come now, Mr. Adams and Mr. Jefferson. Come now, Mr. Adams. You know, we all know these complaints that we all have about the king and about the parliament in Great Britain." He says, "Why do we need to write up a declaration with respect to our independence?" And Jefferson stands up, who doesn't talk as often. He stands up and says, and this is my paraphrase, he says, "To present the argument in terms so plain and simple that it commands assent." Now, what could you possibly say with respect to liberty and freedom when you're speaking it to people and you are speaking and they cannot deny what you're saying? That is my prayer for our, these kind of concepts, that we're after not violating anyone but securing individual liberty and freedom, individual rights. So listen to this. This is written for us. This is profound words. It says, this is July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. What a profound paragraph. I mean, every word here. Let me tell you, folks, listen. Listen what it says. In the course of human events, this is what's going on. This is an event. In the course of human events, it becomes necessary. Is it necessary for one people, it doesn't say who, it just says for one people, to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another. The right that's describing here is the right to freely associate. You have the right in you. I'm not saying corporations have this. I'm not saying governments have this. I'm saying you as people retain the right to freely associate and disassociate with whomever you choose. I don't care what the reason is. No one can compel you to associate with anyone against your will. That is a right. And then it says, when it becomes necessary to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another and assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Each one of us are equal. No one, no man, no woman, no human is above another human. This was profound. And if you think it's weird that a state would want to separate from another a group of people, imagine what it would be like if you were all subjects of a king, and never in the history of the world had the subjects of a king decided, well, I've had enough of that. But they said, yeah, and this was born out of the Christian belief that all people had direct access to the Creator. It's profound that nature recognizes that no one has anything above anyone else. There is no authority. We are all equal in that way. That's the equality there. And then I love this. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind. Now, I've never seen that on Facebook. a respect for the opinions of man. It's like, what? I'm offended at your opinion on this, that, and the other thing. Oh my word, But the idea, I love the sentiment. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. This is a divorce. It's a divorce. And they're declaring the divorce. Listen, and we're not even going to get into all the grievances. How many people that end up in a divorce actually would publish a declaration of your independence and then list the grievances? How many people? I mean, I've thought about this. When a divorce would occur, imagine if you brought in all your friends together. There's the wife, there's the husband, all their friends, all your friends collective, you bring them together, and then you declare the causes of your separation and have them engage and say, well, that's bull, or this is bull, you're wrong, and just take it all in. And then you can say, this is the honorable way we're going to separate because it's not working very well. It's profound. But this is what they said. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind required that they should declare the causes to the separation. And that's what this declaration does. Now listen to this. It says, and this is what everybody knows. We hold these truths to be self-evident. When was the last time truth was self-evident? You don't need an attorney to figure out things. Stop deferring to attorneys to figure it out. They get paid to think for you. Stop allowing politicians and attorneys to think for you. You can do it. And you really can. And anybody else. Like earlier, they were talking, just because they have an education, I challenge the quality of the education, So, but the idea is that truth is self-evident. And that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable or unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It originally was written, and property. But that was too narrow. Pursuit of happiness was much broader. The pursuit of getting to the property, or whatever it is, your happiness, what you want to buy, your property. The pursuit of happiness. Not that the government would provide happiness, your pursuit of it. All right? And then it says, and then listen, the next word is that. Whenever you see the word that, it tells you why. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. The only purpose of a just government is to secure rights. There's no other purpose of a just government but to secure rights. If your government isn't securing rights, it's an unjust government. That's what they said here. Listen, to secure rights, that he says, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people, here's another right, it's the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Simple principle. Let me tell you something. If you're studying law or whatever it is that you think you want to study to have yourself be free, I don't recommend studying statutes and code and all that. It's okay, but it's like studying the counterfeit rather than studying the genuine article. I had a teacher taught me one time and says the experts always study the genuine article. That way, whatever counterfeit comes along, they say, no. They don't have to study the counterfeit. Study the genuine article. Principles are better than statutes and law and all that, okay? So the idea says, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. That's understandable. Look, they're saying, look, we're not just complaining about a thing. We're not just complaining about some event that occurred that's light and transient. Like, there's a grievance that we have, it could be a multiplicity of things. But listen to their sentiment here. They're saying that the governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Like getting used to being frisked when you're going to board an aircraft. because, it's a pain in the butt, but I'm going to go along with it. Or that they're going to, whenever taxes are started off, they're, it's just 1%, it's just 2%, 5%, 30%, 40%. It's like, well, let me, well, when do you draw the line in the sand? How about let's, so when they say, well, let's raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. No, I say, screw that. Let's make it $75 an hour. Oh, no, you can't have that. Okay, $50. Oh, no, we can't have that. Oh, it's like, give me a break. Well, how much is the tyranny? You're right. But I'm saying it's a principle that's the problem. Not as like, well, let's just give it all up. So the idea is that these changes aren't for just light and transient causes. There's something more here. So it says, while evils are sufferable, then to right themselves. It says, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evidences a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient suffrage of these colonies. And I think you could say these states have suffered by the funk that's coming out of Washington, D.C. And such is now necessary, which constrains them to alter their former system of government. Then they go in to say, the history of the present king of Great Britain and is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And then it goes on. I'm not going to get into their grievances. I would take their grievances today all day and take them as freedom based on where we are today. And it has crept in slowly, but is here. The founders would have never put up with the crap we put up with in our lives today from Washington, and certainly the capitals of our states, of course. Then, so if you want to read the grievances, and I think it'd be a great exercise to compare the grievances to what grievances we have today and how bad it is. They would never, they loaded their firearms and said no. And the beauty of the Declaration of Independence was they wrote it and said, listen, we don't want any bloodshed, we just want to be separate. And of course, the king said no. And then I heard some attorneys either on the radio or something, they say, oh, did you know that the Declaration of Independence was illegal? And I thought, this is probably a law school education. They should be suing their school. I say, no shit. No kidding, it was illegal. It was tyranny. It was treason, of course, Give me a break, it was illegal. Duh. I like in the film, 1776, he says and one of the guys that were signing, they said, are you suggesting that our rebellion is in fact a legal rebellion? And Franklin gets up and says, come now, don't you know that rebellion in the first person, such as our rebellion, is always illegal. It's only in the third person, their rebellion, that's illegal. But that's the way it is. It's the same thing with when they talk about terrorists. If a government was invading you and bombing you, of course. Everybody would recognize that if you're being harmed by someone, that you're going to defend yourself. No kidding. So it's amazing what governments label you as when you oppose the government. There's nothing new. This is nothing new. It's the same as back then. Then he says, in every stage, it continues on, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. And I remember one time the IRS was, when Bob Schultz and We the People were doing a redress of grievances to the Congress, they went to the Supreme Court and they were complaining about the taxation. And the Supreme Court told them that the Congress, that you have a right to redress your grievances, but the Congress doesn't have to answer you. Really? Is that really the answer? The Congress, our representatives, don't have to answer our grievances? And then the IRS said to them, we're going to answer their grievances with enforcement, which is exactly what was happening back then. Repeated injury. a prince whose character, and you know, when you look at these things, you know, I'm not on the bandwagon of always blaming the president, okay? America can handle crappy presidents. We have and we will. And that's not a problem, okay? Because what you don't think, listen, the president has very little power. I just want you to know that. In a moment, the Congress can